fine. That's good now. We've got to the point where we've developed a process that manages the risks that we want to control and minimise. We've put it into some documentation. We've got a designed method to produce the results we're after, and we've got people trained up to do it the right way. The question now remains is, are we achieving the outcomes that we're meant to be delivering? Because we had an intention up here to produce a certain degree of reliability that resulted in a certain amount of extra profit that was not there at the moment. So once I've got things happening in my process and the process is working, I'm responsible to make sure that the outcomes that I'm believing is meant to happen are indeed happening. So I'm going to have to introduce some way of monitoring the risk reduction performance against our requirements. So the next step is, once I've got the change in place, I'm going to monitor that change to prove it's working fine. So we're going to have our process maps. If our new design of the process is effective, then as that process operates, we should be getting better results compared to what we had and compared to what we expect. Because on our risk matrix, we have an idea of how much money this new process is meant to deliver to the company. So I want to prove that this new process is in fact producing the results that we had intended for it to produce. So again, the maps become important because those process maps of the new process is how things should work. Once I've got a map and I've got inputs and outputs of each of the steps in that process, I have a way of measuring what each step and what each process is producing. What indicators are we going to use will be a challenge. What KPIs do we apply to monitor this process? So we're going to have to select the KPIs. And these KPIs, we don't want to invent new KPIs. We want to use KPIs that every businessman, every business understands and applies. So we're going to look for things that are practical and that are simple and that are sensible and feed back the right details as this new process is being worked. Part of what we're going to be looking for is ensuring that the number of failures have decreased, that reliability has increased. So I want to look at where that data is kept and pull that data into part of this monitoring process, because the whole point is to drive reliability and create reliability, and I've got to come and see that is happening. So I'm going to look for reduction in failures, reduction in problems, an increase in profit, an increase in throughput. If reliability is paying off for this company, I should be seeing real value from these new processes. And if I'm not seeing real value, then something's amiss. Let me go back and correct what I've left out, if that's the case. So we're going to monitor reliability growth. And if the growth is there, wonderful, it's what we wanted. If it's not there, or it's not there enough of, then we have to work out where that is being lost. This is a bit of a lean concept, because lean is an understanding that there is waste happening in a business. A business is designed to produce a certain product from raw materials coming in, and the more waste and loss and failures and breakdowns and disappointing performance that happened across that business, the less and less profit is left in that business. So I want to take the idea of this lean concept of monitoring the waste into how we're going to monitor our own processes in future. Because if our process is losing value along the way, then each step where there is waste, we should be able to measure how much waste is coming out of these steps. We know how much raw materials coming in, we know how much inputs are coming in to do the conversion in that step, and if we're not getting the full conversion value, then that is going into some sort of waste, whether it's a material waste or a human waste or health and safety waste. So I want to take that idea of how do I measure the success of each activity, each step in this process, and where are the problems? Where is the money being lost in our activities? In the book we talk about the idea of a process step contribution. Each process step should be adding value, should be converting the raw material coming in to something we want out of that process step. We're going to have material inputs and human resource inputs and financial inputs into that process. If we're not getting the full conversion of the value coming in, and not being produced in saleable and useful product, then that difference is going to be the waste. And if that waste is a big proportion of the value we're putting into that step, then I've got to recognise I've got a serious problem here and focus on how to minimise that waste. And in fact, reduce it and remove it would be the ideal thing. So when we talk about process step contribution, it's literally that. These steps that we're using to make what we're going to sell to clients, which of these steps are the useful value creating steps and which are the wasteful loss making steps? And this concept here was to be able to put a financial number on loss. We have cheated this by using the risk matrix. The risk matrix talks about financial consequences of failure versus against the frequency of failure. So the risk matrix allows us to put a dollar value on something going wrong. This process is probably more of an accounting approach than using the risk matrix. This comes back down to actual dollars and cents going in to the steps, dollars and cents coming out, and what's missing must be the waste that we're throwing away because things are not being processed correctly in that step. So this level of analysis would be what the accountants would typically do. I think you'd probably even call it lean accounting would be the sort of philosophy that we would adopt here. So this technique is very much an accounting-based investigation of loss and waste in a process that a company uses. I don't dwell on this a lot in plant and equipment wellness, but we have a methodology to actually go back and talk accounting language to our finance guys. We can actually analyse what's wrong with our process financially by using this approach here. Prefer to use the risk matrix because it's so much easier, so much quicker, so much faster and so much more visible than doing a lot of financial modelling. But if the accountants want to know where we can add value and where we can stop the waste and put that value lost back into the business, we can approach it as an accounting perspective. It can certainly be done because lean accounting does that already, and ABC, activity-based costing, also does that already. So we're going to use the ABC methodology at the process step level. And we can look at value in, value out. If the two are not equal, it must be waste. And if that waste is a big proportion of the value lost, then we have reason to go in and minimise that waste and hopefully reduce that waste. When it comes to getting the right performance indicators, we want to make sure we are measuring things that are actually sensible and reflect what is intended to be measured. For example, up here, this is regular indicators a lot of companies use. If the goal is to reduce accidents and penalties, then I need to have an indicator that reflects that what we're measuring is about reducing accidents and penalties. So I'm going to start measuring as an indicator, are we delivering and meeting regulatory compliance? Because if I'm meeting regulatory compliance and meeting the law and people are following the right requirements with PPE, protective equipment to wear, then by wearing protective equipment, any risk to being hurt is reduced. If I put on safety boots, then wearing boots means I will have less cut toes. I put a helmet on, then by wearing a helmet I will have less smashed heads against pipework and against sides of buildings. So if the guys are meeting the compliance requirements and by doing that they protect themselves, then I want to measure that. Are they actually doing the right thing that leads to the right results? Same with safety. We're going to start measuring safety KPIs because if they are improving, then that means I'm having less accidents and will suffer less penalties. Same with equipment wellness. What are the parameters that we measure that reflect reliability improvement, reflect cost savings, reflect increase in uptime? So increase in productivity, to measure that that is happening, I'm going to measure instead availability of resources. Are the machines available to produce, or are they down so often that I can never get better productivity? Is our strategy a proactive strategy? Are we ahead of the breakdowns, or are we waiting for the breakdowns to fix them? Because if I'm still practicing reactive maintenance, then I can never get increased productivity. I've got to prevent maintenance. I've got to prevent problems. So I can start measuring the things that produce the goal that we want. So the same with plant and equipment wellness. The monitoring we're going to apply on our process is to make sure that we are doing the things that will deliver those outcomes from the process. Same concept as any KPI that companies use, but we have to pick the right KPIs that really reflect the goals that we're trying to achieve. Now, this particular slide's about what companies measure, what companies want to deliver the results they're after. If a company's after net present value, good return on investment, then high return on investment needs high productivity, needs low unit costs. So I can put into place KPIs that measure the effect of unit cost and KPIs that affect the measure of productivity. And these results, these KPIs that I'm tracking, reflect the success and the possibility of achieving the productivity. Well, productivity needs plant availability. The machine has to be working and it has to be operating correctly, making quality product at the right speed. And so I can measure the success of our efforts in availability by measuring the uptime of that equipment. In terms of operability of the equipment, I can measure some KPIs that reflect the way this operation uses this equipment. Availability depends on reliability and maintainability, and I can put in KPIs to measure if we're doing these KPIs correctly, then they are producing reliability. So when it comes to plant wellness, and we want to monitor, is risk being reduced? Is reliability going up? Then I can pick the KPIs that do show, because these are being done correctly, they must be producing high reliability and higher performance. So selecting the monitoring KPIs is important, because if we're watching the wrong indicator, it doesn't reflect what the goal is, then we're not really monitoring what the process is meant to achieve. We're monitoring something, a report comes out and people look at the report and like it or don't like it, but is it actually the report that reflects what this process is meant to be achieving? Every company has KPIs across its different levels of an organisation. So we're not going to change any of this thinking. We're going to simply make sure that these KPIs we use really reflect the process outcome. That once those KPIs are trending up the right way, then that also means our process is producing the results that we want. So we're going to try and live with existing indicators, existing formulas, existing reports, because people are used to those, provided they are the right ones to use to show that our process is indeed doing what it's meant to do. Again, these are common indicators for equipment reliability. If we're going to look at improving reliability, have we applied, for example, the RCM technique? In our case, we would look at using techniques that ensure reliability is being developed. This reliability growth cause analysis, are we using that technique? Have we reduced problems in our machines that are bad actors? So are we doing these activities that produce reliability? Maintainability, are we measuring these factors that, when they're done properly, produce high maintainability? So we don't want to have too many KPIs. We want to make sure the KPIs are reflecting reliability, maintainability, process improvement, and human reliability. Are our people better people? Have we got processes in place that assist our guys to do good quality work? So if these things are being done right, then the outcome must be better reliability, better performance of our people, and better process outcomes for the business, because the right things are being done, and that means the right outcomes must be happening. Again, conceptually, KPIs, the business targets, they roll down to the plant targets, that roll down to our individual process targets. So we're not going to change any of that. We are wanting to use these concepts. So if our intention is to increase uptime a certain percentage, then how do we measure that each plant is doing its share of work? How do we ensure that at the process level, at the ground floor level, at the maintenance workshop, in the engineering support facilities and support systems, are the right things being done? So we can snowball our goals down to the various departments, down to the various people in the various departments if we want to go that far. So we're simply going to adopt what is standard business practice. The only challenge for us is to make sure that when we have a KPI that we're actually trending and monitoring, it's about making sure that the outcomes that we designed to occur are actually occurring. So again, there's nothing new here. It's just recognising that this is fine, this concept works, but we want to make sure it's targeted on the wellness aspect of our efforts here. We're going to naturally produce process flow diagrams of the design process we're going to use to achieve the results that we want from the business. Once I've got a flow diagram here, I'm in a position to begin KPIing different aspects. Because this particular process produces a known output, I can KPI the whole process and say, well, from this input here to this output there, what's the effectiveness of this process? And I can select KPIs to measure time, to measure resource usage, to measure cost, to measure the performance of this process. I can't give you that KPI right now, but I can say, well, knowing I want to see the conversion and the efficiency of this process, I pick a KPI is about being an effective process and being an efficient process. If I want to actually see what's happening at this one step in this entire process, I can put KPIs in place for this one step because there's an input and there's an output. I can compare the two. I can see what cost it is to make that conversion. If that cost is too high at this step, then I'm going to say, well, this is too expensive. Can we find a better solution, a smarter solution? So yes, once we have these flow diagrams, we're in a very powerful position to monitor the process because this is designed to produce a certain known output. This is the output we designed it to produce. And is that process delivering this output? Then you put some measures in place to confirm the right things are being done, they're being done in the right way, in which case the outputs will be there. That's as hard as it gets. The challenge will be to work out what is the measure to take, what data to use, what way to show that data, what database do I go to in the business to pull the information out. But we can certainly do that because we have a known design and a required output. And if that required output is not being achieved, then our KPIing of that process will highlight where the shortcomings are. All right, this is a little activity I need you to do with us. It's called the crosshair game, and I talk about it in the book, and it's all about seeing what process outcomes result and what that means to a business. So if I can get you guys just to play the game with us. What I get you to do is, I've got a 1 cent coin here. Just want you to put the 1 cent coin on there and draw a circle around. And that'll be, let me do that too. Bruce, you got to, here's one.
I do not have a 1 cent.
There it is. It's okay. Then just
Behind your power.
Then in the middle, just put 2 crosshairs on that circle. So we've got a very clear target. Of course, the target here is, so put a crosshairs through that circle to give us a target to shoot for. It's called the crosshair game because the crosshairs are what we're trying to get a process that is always hitting those crosshairs. All right, so the way the story goes is we're actually in business. Our company is in business and our client wants us to produce a coin or a section of material with 10 dots in that circle, 10 dots. And we require a certain indentation, and the indentation we get from dropping the pen at the top of the ruler there into the circle. So our job is to drop the pen 10 times and get 10 times out of 10. So please, just take that ruler and drop the pen 10 times into the circle because the client wants 10 dots in the circle and he'll pay us for a 10 out of 10 situation. To the very top, Bruce. That's it, up to the very top. Further up. I need the full height. I need the indentation at a certain depth, and only that particular level or only that particular height gives us that. When you drop to 10, tell me how many of the 10 you get in there.
I'm bad.
There's a whole point behind this, and we'll certainly discuss that when the time comes.
I only got 3 in the circle.
Yep, that's a good result, actually. How are you going? Look, there's no right or wrong here. It's not about being right. It's about understanding that
I got 4.
4. That's not common. That's a good result. Although you were bobber, you were over the top looking down where to drop it.
It was sticking to my finger. So when I dropped it, it would go.
Our process, the process to get 10 out of 10, depends on so many things going right. Sticky fingers and right away, it's not going to happen. That's going to go off to one side. If we are wobbly with our hands, we're going to miss that 10 out of 10. I've done this now probably about 1,000 times across different situations. 0 is very common, 1's very common, 2's very common, 3's getting uncommon, 4 is unusual, 5 occasionally. The best I've ever got, one guy out of 1,000 got 9. 9 out of 10.
Was he the guy that made the funnel?
Well, no, he did it naturally, just dropping it. Every now and again, some guys have got a knack. You come across a guy with a knack to do that job. And I couldn't believe it. I said, no, do it again. Second time, he got 5 out of 10. Some people just have a talent to do this particular thing fantastically well, and no one else in the world can match them. So out of 1,000 people, one person's got close to 10 out of 10. The whole point here is the process that I've chosen to use is a process that requires a great deal of luck. Now, there's no science behind the process. I'm just going to drop a pen from a particular point. So what I've actually done is I need a process where I get 10 out of 10. My customer wants 10 out of 10. That's what he's paying for. I've got a process with this distribution here. That's the distribution it gets. When I drew this, I had about 600 people do this. So 0, 1, 2, very common, because the process is all about luck, pure luck. So if I'm in business to create this, and this is what the customer wants, and I have a process that delivers that, I will never make money, because that process is a luck-based process. So in Planet Equipment Wellness, we want to start measuring process outcomes against the requirements of that process, because it's very clear this process is absolutely useless to achieve what this business wants. So if I have a process and the process outcomes do not produce the reliability I'm after, then I want to see that very, very clearly, very, very quickly. So measuring and trending and graphing and plotting is part of how we monitor that the process we use actually produces the results we want. This whole process has to shift across to here and be very, very tight. 10 out of 10. So gentlemen, we are in trouble. This business is going to fail. In fact, it has failed. I have no more ideas. I've run out of thoughts. Guys, we need 10 out of 10. We need the crosshair. Every time we act and make this product, got to be on that crosshair every single time. Please, ideas. Give me ideas to ensure we are always on those crosshairs every single time. What sort of things can we do?
Well, we have an indentation device mounted on a jig that only hits the...
So you're saying some sort of post up and down on that yeah? Absolutely. Yeah, that will work. That will give us 10 out of 10 a million times in a row. Absolutely. That process will give us this without question. And I can measure that and confirm it every single time. That isn't the only answer.
Well, I like the one in the book about the funnel.
Yeah. What that guy did is he said, take that paper, turn it into a funnel. Make the whole thing a funnel. So now, doesn't matter. Any human error, doesn't matter. It always comes to the point it has to be. The other one that we also get very often is a tube. Get a tube the right size, put that over the the whole, and again, 10 out of 10 every single time, 1,000,000 times in a row. So what I'm saying is here, if your process is producing lousy results, change the process. Those results are the outcome of making that choice. So if I measure the performance and it's nowhere near what I need, it's not my fault. It's not his fault, not the CEO's fault. It's the process you've chosen is the wrong process for the job. Change your process. And if that means you have to introduce more documentation, better training, that's what you're going to need, because your current process is not working for you, unless you're lucky to hit a guy in 1,000 that can do 9 out of 10. And that's the story behind Planet Equipment Wellness. To find the process that always produces the results we want. And we keep improving the process till we know 10 out of 10, 1,000,000 times over. Yesterday, on day one, we saw this particular graph, and that's the whole point of this graph. Let's model that process and see if this process is a stable process. And if that process result is unsatisfactory, if 31 hours breakdown per week plus or minus 3 sigma is unsatisfactory, then that process you've got, that whole business of doing maintenance and running your plant will not work for you. If you want 10 hours at an average per week breakdown maintenance and no more than 10 hours, you can't get it with what you're doing. What you're doing is giving you this 3 times more than you want. You want to have 1/3 of that outage, 1/3 of that cost, 1/3 of that downtime. Can't do it. I've got to change processes, change 2 processes that can give me the results I want. So yes, doing this distribution on the outcomes of companies' performance and process performance is the key reason to go to management and say, well, look, here's your business. This is exactly your data on this particular model, and you will always get those results within that boundary. But you want to have better. You're saying you want to get results down here. Well, Mr. Manager, you can't do it with what you've got. What you've got's giving you this. You want to be much, much better. You've got to change to something that's much, much better. And it's not your fault, it's not my fault, it's not the CEO's fault, it's not the operator's fault, not the maintainer's fault. It's the process you've chosen to get to where you are today. And that could be more than one process, could be a dozen processes, could be 100 processes. The interaction of all those and the randomness nature of their outcomes is producing the business result. So yeah, this particular diagram, very, very powerful because it explains where you are today, and if where you are today is an unhappy place, then you can't keep doing the same things because you're going to stay in that place because that's what it gives you. So that previous slide was actually data from a company that I did some work with, and all it was their maintenance hours recorded in their maintenance system by the week. Excel spreadsheet. It was no harder than that, and from that plotting we're able to develop a representation of the stability of this failure creating process, breakdown creating process this company's got. Now this is the real results in their business. This is what their business is delivering. So if I can't talk about dollars and cents, I can talk about the outcomes that will always result from their current practices. So this can be talked to with the manager and say, well look, here's where the world is. This is your data we've got. I've modelled your situation and it will always be that way. If you're happy with that, great, carry on. If you're unhappy with that, then you cannot carry on with the current processes you use. So we can go back and begin challenging now their operating practices, their maintenance practices, their engineering practices, their financial measurement practices. It's a whole bunch of stuff that you've got to start questioning because that's where they got today using those approaches. That might be enough to get them to begin saying, well, what do you suggest we do? And then, of course, we can go in and analyse what is actually causing those costs and come up with solutions because we understand why machines are failing and what to do about those. The previous slide was actually data from a company that I did some work with, and all it was their maintenance hours recorded in their maintenance system by the week. Excel spreadsheet. It was no harder than that, and from that plotting we're able to develop a representation of the stability of this failure creating process, breakdown creating process this company's got. Now this is the real results in their business. This is what their business is delivering. So if I can't talk about dollars and cents, I can talk about the outcomes that will always result from their current practices. So this can be talked to with a manager and say, well look, here's where the world is. This is your data we've got. I've modelled your situation and it will always be that way. If you're happy with that, great, carry on. If you're unhappy with that, then you cannot carry on with the current processes you use. So we can go back and begin challenging their operating practices, their maintenance practices, their engineering practices, their financial measurement practices. It's a whole bunch of stuff that you've got to start questioning because that's where they got today using those approaches. That might be enough to get them to begin saying, well, what do you suggest we do? And then, of course, we can go in and analyse what is actually causing those costs and come up with solutions because we understand why machines are failing and what to do about those.